My name is Jason Hurd. I recently completed 10 years of honorable service to my country in both the U.S. Army and the Tennessee National Guard. I served in central Baghdad from November of '04 to November of '05. I'm from a little place nestled in the mountains of East Tennessee called Kingsport, and hence the mountain man beard. People don't really trust you if you're clean-shaven there. Kingsport is truly small-town America. There's a Baptist church on every street corner, and even the high-class restaurants serve biscuits and gravy. My father, Carl C. Hurd, who died in 2000, he was 76 years old. He was a Marine during World War II. Obviously, I was a latecomer in his life. He didn't have me until in his late 50s. As a matter of fact, when he died, shortly after that, I have the 2 World War II battles he participated in tattooed on my arm, and my father had the same tattoo. He was in the Pacific Campaign and participated in the battles of Tarawa and Guadalcanal, which were some of the bloodiest occurrences of that war. I decided to join the military in 1997. I was 17 years old. I had just graduated from high school, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my life. My father was adamantly opposed to me serving in the military. My father was one of the most warmongering, gun-loving people you could ever meet. But he didn't feel that way when it came to his son because he knew the negative psychological consequences of combat service. Looking back, I know for a fact that my father had post-traumatic stress disorder. He had the rage, he had the nightmares, and he had the flashbacks. I decided against my father's wishes to go into the military as a medic in August of '97. I went to basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I did my medical training at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and I spent the rest of my 4-year tour on active duty at Fort Lewis, Washington, serving under the 2nd ID. Originally, I intended to do my 4 years and get off of active duty and go to college in in Johnson City, Tennessee. But about a month before I left active duty, a National Guard recruiter approached me and said, "Hey, we've got a expanded unit in your hometown in Kingsport, and if you decide to join that, we can give you a lot of college money." And he offered me so much college money that it swayed my vote, so I decided to sign up for 6 more years in the Tennessee National Guard. I deployed to Iraq in June of '07, we deployed to Camp Shelby, Mississippi for a train-up to go to Iraq in June of '04. We got into Iraq in November of '04, and I was there until November of '05. I served as a medic with Troop F, 2nd Squadron, 278th Regimental Combat Team. Our first 6 months in country were relatively uneventful. We had missions that did not expose us to a lot of danger. We lived inside the Green Zone, otherwise known as the International Zone, in central Baghdad. Our first mission, when we got on the ground, we manned observation points around the Green Zone. We had 3 in a zoo where the border of the Green Zone passes through, and we had 2 on the Tigris River that overlooked it. These few months, like I said, were relatively uneventful. Except for one incident that I can remember. One of the observation points that overlooked the Tigris River looked out at the old Republican Guard barracks, which were across the river. And there was one of those buildings that was sort of dilapidated. However, we knew that squatters had taken this building over, and we actually used to make jokes that this place looked like a crack house and that they were running drugs out of there. We had no evidence of that. It was just joking. One day, Iraqi police got into an exchange of gunfire with some unknown individuals around that building. Some of the stray rounds came across the Tigris River and hit the shield of one of our Hummers. The gunner atop that Hummer decided to open fire with his .50 caliber machine gun into that building. He expended about a case and a half of ammunition. And I'm no weapons expert, I'm a medic, but I talked to some of my colleagues just the other night, and to put this into perspective for you all, Each case of 50 cal ammunition holds about 150 rounds. A case and a half is well over 200 rounds. Over 200 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition could take out just about every single person in this room. We fired indiscriminately and unnecessarily at this building. We never got a body count. We never got a casualty count afterwards. Another unit came through and swept up that mess. Ladies and gentlemen, things like that happen every day in Iraq. We react out of fear. Fear for our lives, and we cause complete and utter destruction. After we finished the mission manning those observation points, we moved on. My platoon specifically was tasked with running security escort for 2 explosive ordnance teams, 1 U.S. Navy and 1 Australian EOD team. On day 1, the U.S. Navy team took us all aside for some specialized training. They took us aside and said, look, EOD teams are some of the most highly targeted entities in Iraq. The reason being is because, hey, we're the guys that go out and we disarm car bombs. We mess up the tactics and the operations of the insurgency. That's why we're highly targeted. So you guys have to use more aggressive tactics to protect us. And they explained to us that what we were to do is keep a 50-meter perimeter, a 50-meter bubble around our trucks at all times, whether we're driving down the road or whether we're stationary. And if anything comes in that 50-meter bubble, we're to get it out immediately. If it doesn't want to move, we use what are called levels of aggression. Your first option is to try to push it out by using hand signals, hand and arm signals. Your next option is to fire a warning shot into the ground. And from there on, you walk bullets up the car, and your last option is to shoot the person driving the car. This is for our own protection. Car bombs are a real danger in Iraq, and in fact, that's the vast majority of what I saw in Baghdad is car bombings. My unit adhered strictly to these guidelines for a few weeks. But as time went on and the absurdity of war sat in, they started taking things too far. Individuals from my unit indiscriminately and unnecessarily opened fire on innocent civilians as they're driving down the road on their own streets. My unit, individuals from my platoon, would fire into the grills of these cars and then come back in the evenings after missions were done and brag about it. They would say, hey, did you guys see that car I shot at? It spewed radiator fluid all over the ground. Wasn't that cool? I remember thinking back on that and how appalled I was that we were bragging about these things, that we were laughing. But that's what you do in a combat zone. That is your reality. That is how you deal with that predicament. After we finished the EOD escort missions, we moved on to another mission, patrolling the Kindy Street area, which is right outside of the green zone. Kindy Street is a relatively upscale neighborhood. Some of the houses in the Kindy area would cost well over $1 million here in America. This area, from what we were told, had no violent activity at all up until the point we started patrolling this area. We were the first U.S. military to do so on any regular basis. So we went in, we started doing patrols through the streets. We started getting out, meeting and greeting the local population, trying to figure out what sort of issues they had, how we could resolve those issues. I remember we were out on a patrol one day, a dismounted patrol, and we were walking by a woman's house. She was outside in her garden doing some work. We had our interpreter with us, and our interpreter threw up his hand and said, "Salam alaikum," which is their greeting in Iraq. It means peace of God be with you. And he translated back to us what she said. She said, no peace of God be with you. She was angry and she was frustrated. And so we stopped, and our interpreter said, well, what's the matter? Why are you so angry? We're here protecting you. We're here to ensure your safety. And that woman began to tell us a story. Just a few months prior to this, her husband had been shot and killed by a United States convoy because he got too close to their convoy. He was not an insurgent. He was not a terrorist. He was merely a working man trying to make a living for his family. To make matters worse, a few weeks later, there was a Special Forces team who operated in the Kindy area. And as you know, Special Forces do clandestine operations. And so even though this was my unit's area of operation, we didn't know what the Special Forces teams were actually doing there. They holed up in a building there in the Kindy Street area and made a compound out of it. A few weeks after this man died, the Special Forces team got some intelligence that this woman was supporting the insurgency. And so they conducted a raid on her home, zip-tied her and her 2 children, threw them on the floor, and I guess her son was old enough to be perceived as a possible threat, so they detained him and took him away. For the next 2 weeks, this woman had no idea whether her son was alive, dead, or worse. At the end of that 2 weeks, the Special Forces team rolled up, dropped her son off, and without so much as an apology, drove off. It turns out they had acted on bad intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, things like that happen every day in Iraq. We are harassing these people. We are disrupting their lives. I want to tell you a very personal story. And I want you all to bear with me because this is always difficult for me to tell. One day we were on another dismounted patrol through the Kindy Street area. We were walking past an area we called the Garden Center because it was literally a fenced-off garden. As is policy, we are to keep all cars and individuals away from our formation. And so a car was approaching us from the front. I was at the rear of the formation because I was the medic, and the medics hang out at the back with the platoon sergeant in case anything happens up front so you can respond. They waved the car off down a side street so that it would not come near our formation. As I made it up to that side street, the car had turned around and was coming back towards us because the street was blocked off by a concrete T-barrier at the other end. So I began doing my levels of aggression. I held up my hand, trying to get the car to stop. The car sped up. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is it. This is someone who is trying to hurt us. And so instead of doing what I should have done according to policy and raising my weapon, instead I did what you should never do, and I took my hands off of my weapon altogether and began jumping up and down, waving my hands back and forth, trying to get this car to stop and see me. The car kept coming. And so I raised my weapon, and the car kept coming. I pulled my selector switch off of safe, and the car kept coming. I was applying pressure to my trigger, getting ready to fire on the vehicle. And out of nowhere, a man came off of the side of the road, flagged the car down, and got it to pull over. He walked around to the driver's side door, opened it up, and out popped an 80-year-old woman. Come to find out, this woman was a highly respected figure in the community, and I don't have a clue what would have happened had I opened fire on this woman. I would imagine a riot. Ladies and gentlemen, I hate guns. I spent 10 years in the military, and I carried 2 of them on my side in Iraq. But I think they should be melted down and turned into jewelry. To this day, that is the worst thing that I've ever done in my life. I am a peaceful person, but yet in Iraq, I drew down on an 80-year-old geriatric woman who could not see me because I was in front of a desert-colored desert-colored building wearing desert-colored camouflage. Another personal story from my experience. The next mission that we got was to man the main checkpoint that entered into the green zone. We called this checkpoint Slaughterhouse 11 because the very first day we got into country, a car bomb went off in that checkpoint. We were a couple of blocks away at the time, and none of us knew what it was, so we were asking around, what was that? What was that? Oh, that's the car bomb that goes off every single morning at checkpoint 11. And that's where the name Slaughterhouse 11 comes from. You could literally set your watch by the time a car bomb would explode in that checkpoint every day. Towards the end of my tour, we got the mission to take that checkpoint over. And my unit said, "What is the matter with you people? We're getting ready to go home in just a couple of months. Why are you giving us Slaughterhouse 11? Are you wanting us to die?" Day one that we took that checkpoint over and ran it ourselves, a car bomb drove into it and exploded. We found out that there was over 1,000 pounds of explosives in that car afterwards. Luckily, it did not hurt any of my guys. My guys were able to find cover, and it didn't hurt them. But it killed untold numbers of Iraqi civilians in queue to come into the checkpoint and injured so many more. I treated 5 people that day myself, and I would imagine 20 or 30 others got carted off into civilian ambulances before I could get to them. But I have an image that is burned into my mind to this very day. And I remember a man running towards me at the front of the checkpoint carrying a young 17 or 18-year-old Iraqi guy, very thin, very sort of pale. He came running to me with this guy and laid him at my feet. I looked down at him, and the guy was missing from here to here of his arm, and his forearm was only held on by a small flap of skin. The bones were protruding, and it was bleeding profusely. He had shrapnel wounds all over his torso, and when I log rolled him onto his side to check his rear for wounds, I noticed that his entire left butt cheek was missing, and it was bleeding profusely, and it was pooling blood. And to this day, I have that image burned in my mind's eye. Almost every couple of days, I will get a flash of red color in my mind's eye, and it won't have any shape, no form, just a flash of red, and every time I associate it with that instant. So not only are we disrupting the lives of Iraqi civilians, but we're disrupting the lives of our veterans with this occupation. You know, conservative statistics say that the majority of Iraqis support attacks against coalition forces. The majority of Iraqis support us leaving immediately, and the majority of Iraqis see us as the main contributors to the violence in Iraq. This gives us a view at the prevailing sentiment in Iraq, and I like to explain it to everyone this way, especially in the South, because it rings with some semblance of truth to people down there. If a foreign occupying force came here to the United States, and regardless of what they told us, whether they told us they were here to free us, to liberate us, and to give us democracy, do you not think that every person that owns a shotgun would not come out of the hills and fight for their right to self-determination? And I like to sum it up like this. The prevailing sentiment in Iraq is this. Another time that I was out on patrol in the Kindy Street area, as I said, part of our mission was to meet and greet the local population and find out what their problems were. And so I approached a man with my interpreter on the side of the road, and I asked him, I said, "Look, are your lives better because we're here? Are you safer? Do you feel more secure? Do you feel like we are liberating you?" And that man looked at me straight in the eye, and he said, "Mister, we Iraqis know that you have good intentions here. But the fact of the matter is, before America invaded, we didn't have to worry about car bombs in our neighborhoods. We didn't have to worry about the safety of our own children as they walk to school. And we didn't have to worry about U.S. soldiers shooting at us as we drive up and down our own streets. Ladies and gentlemen, the suffering in Iraq is tearing that country apart, and ending that suffering begins with a complete and immediate withdrawal of all of our troops. Thank you very much."